Your free will is not in your control. Just a minute ago, you scrolled on YouTube and saw countless videos on your feed, but still, you decided to watch this. Why? Because you want to watch this? Not really. Scientists proved in the experiments what we think and believe in our free will is just an illusion. So does that mean that if I take and hold this book in my hand, then maybe it's not because of my own will? But is it really true? From the very beginning, we heard our will is in our hands. So is this incorrect? Is our will not in our control? And if yes, then who controls our will? My friend, stick till the end, because what you're going to hear in the video will literally blow your mind. Let's start with one of the earliest experiments that shook up everything we thought we knew about free will. This was back in the 1980s, when a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that changed how we think about decision-making. Here's what he did. Libet asked people to do a very simple task. They only just had to move their hand whenever they felt like it. Meanwhile, Libet and his team were waiting and monitoring their brain activity with an EEG. Now, EEG is a machine that records electrical activity in the brain. Now, you'd probably think that when someone decides to move their hand, the brain will show signs of that decision before they take action. For example, if I decide to move my right hand, it feels like my brain should start preparing for that action. And after that, I make the choice to move, right? But what Libet found was the opposite. Libet discovered a phenomenon known as the readiness potential, RP, which is an electrical signal in the brain that appears approximately 550 milliseconds before even the participants reported being aware of their intention to move. In other words, the brain has already started preparing to do the action subconsciously before we even are aware of it. Let's understand this with a really quick example. Just close your eyes right now and just think you're moving your hand. Now, your brain had already started the process of moving it before you felt the urge to do it. Strange, right? That's what Libet's experiment was showing us. And it became more shocking when in the 1960s, doctors were doing something called split brain surgery to help people with severe epilepsy. This meant they would cut a connection in the brain called the corpus callosum, which links the left and right sides of the brain. By doing this, they could stop seizures from spreading across the brain. But here's where it gets weird. Once the two sides of the brain were separated, doctors noticed that each half of the brain seemed to start acting independently. It was like there were two different minds in one person. This experiment showed that the left side of the brain handles language and logic, while the right side focuses on visuals and spatial awareness. And because this is the evidence that our two sides of the brain can act independently, it clearly challenges the concept of free will and shows us that our ideas may not come from a single conscious source, but from the different intricate regions of our brain. To understand this more clearly, we have to understand the quantum mechanics. This is the study of the tiniest particles in our universe, like atoms and electrons. What's strange about these particles is that they don't always behave in predictable ways. Instead, they seem to exist in multiple states or possibilities until we observe them, almost like they're deciding what to be in that moment. This unpredictability has led some scientists to wonder if quantum mechanics might be involved in how our brain makes choices. So it's like flipping a coin, but instead of landing on heads or tails, the coin somehow stays in a maybe state. It's not heads or tails until you look. That's a bit like how these tiny particles behave. And it's possible that this randomness plays a role in our brains too. Around a century ago, Sir Roger Penrose, one of quantum mechanics' founding fathers, proposed an intriguing connection between quantum physics and consciousness. He mentioned this in his book, The Emperor's New Mind, and presented a mind-blowing statement. Our consciousness couldn't simply be operating like a computer, following predetermined algorithms or patterns shaped by evolution. He suggested that quantum mechanics must play a big role in our consciousness and decision-making processes. And definitely, this was a very bold claim by a physicist to make, especially without any concrete evidence. While some believe it was just merely an attempt to explain consciousness's randomness by linking it to quantum mechanics. However, due to a lack of evidence, this idea was temporarily set aside. But then something shocking happened. In the mid-1900s, doctors noticed something weird. They were using different gases to put people to sleep during surgery. Most of these gases work by changing brain chemicals. However, one gas, nitrous oxide, laughing gas, worked differently. It barely reacts to anything, but still makes people unconscious. This became a mystery until scientists found that this gas interacted with special structures inside neurons of our brains called microtubules. Microtubules are essentially cellular zip lines that transport proteins, chemicals, and cellular components within cells, including the signaling molecules that travel between neurons. However, scientists have found that these microtubules appear and disappear randomly. So, is randomness connected to quantum physics? Well, yes. Even in this year 2024, recently, scientists found something amazing. Those microtubules we talked about, they showed signs of quantum behavior. And scientists discovered a phenomenon where particles become connected in such a way that interacting with one instantly affects the other, regardless of distance. You know, like how most people think our brain is just like a computer that follows a fixed programming based on our memories and past experiences? Well, this discovery suggests something far more interesting. Scientists now believe there are 3 fascinating layers to every decision we make. First, there's what I call our brain's wiring. These are our habits and memories, like how you might automatically reach for coffee every morning because that's just what you've always done. Second, we have our gut feelings, those unconscious thoughts that pop up without us knowing why. It's that unexplainable feeling that tells you, I should take a different route to work today without any obvious reason. And here's the third and most interesting layer: quantum randomness. It's like having a tiny spark of true creativity in your brain that lets you make completely unique choices. So, are our choices entirely random? Not exactly, but quantum mechanics and emergence show us that decision-making might be much more complicated and mysterious than we ever imagined. But do we really have free will? Or are all our actions somehow determined by factors outside our control? This brings us to the idea of determinism. Determinism is the belief that every event, including every choice we make, is the result of a chain of events that came before it. In other words, if everything in the universe follows a set pattern or cause and effect, then our choices might be predetermined by the conditions around us and our brain's reactions to them. It's just like a row of falling dominoes. Once you push the first one, each domino falls in a set pattern. In determinism, our decisions would be like those falling dominoes where each one is influenced by the last, with no real way to break the chain. But if our decisions are just part of a chain of events, does that mean we're not actually choosing anything at all? And if our brain activity starts before we even realize we're making a choice, as we saw with subconscious brain activity, does that mean free will is just an illusion? Well, on the other side of the debate, some people believe in free will, the idea that we have real control over our choices, no matter what. They argue that, even if there are influences around us, we still have the power to decide what to do. Well, what do you think about it? Please let me know in the comments. And even though we've talked about how much of our decision-making might happen outside our awareness, there's good news. Our brains are actually changeable. This brings us to the concept of neuroplasticity, which means that our brain can form new connections and adapt over time. For example, Every time we learn something new or practice a habit, our brain creates and strengthens pathways that help us do it better. So, if you make an effort to change a behavior, like choosing to be more patient, for example, your brain slowly adapts, making it easier for you to act that way in the future. This ability to reshape our brain is where self-control and awareness come in. Let's say you've got a habit of reaching for your phone whenever you feel bored. At first, it might feel automatic, but with awareness, you can start catching yourself in the moment. Each time you make a choice not to reach for your phone, you're strengthening a new pathway in your brain. Over time, this practice of catching yourself and making a conscious choice can lead to real changes in behavior. Neuroplasticity shows us that while we might have automatic patterns, we're not stuck with them forever. With enough awareness and effort, we can influence the pathways in our brains and gain more control over how we respond. So, even though we may not have full control over every decision, neuroplasticity gives us hope that we can still shape our habits, reactions, and behaviors, and that's a powerful form of self-control. So, what do all these experiments really tell us? When we look at the brain's subconscious activity, split brain studies, and the idea of determinism, it's easy to wonder, do we truly have free will? Or are we just following a script our brains have already set in motion? The truth is that science is showing us that our brains make a lot of choices before we're even aware of them. So, in one way, it seems like we have less control than we thought, as if free will might really be an illusion. But at the same time, we've also learned about neuroplasticity, the power of awareness, and how we can shape new habits. This means that even if our decisions start subconsciously, we still have the power to influence how we respond and grow. So, are we completely free? Maybe not. However, we do have the ability to create positive changes, one choice at a time, by using awareness and intention. If you found this video thought-provoking and want to dive deeper into the mysteries of the mind, hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning and there are many things to come. Don't forget to like and share if this sparks your curiosity, and I'll see you in the next video.